What would you do if you discovered your spouse's 40-year secret affair with their childhood best friend? After Bruce's childhood friend Martha suffered a terrible accident during the Christmas season and broke her leg, Bruce decided to bring her home and asked me to help take care of her. I cleaned the guest room in preparation for Martha's arrival, but while I was doing so, I discovered something. Unexpectedly, a compilation of more than 500 letters written over 40 years between Bruce and Martha documented their nearly 5-decade-long relationship. In those pages, Bruce expressed his love, devotion, and longing for Martha, their words brimming with intimacy and passion. When Bruce brought Martha home, I met him with a calm resolve, looking him in the eye, and I said, "Let's get a divorce." My heart pounded with a mixture of shock and clarity as I read the letters. The marriage I had thought was solid and fulfilling had been full of cracks from the beginning, and I knew that a forced love was never meant to last. By the time Bruce brought Martha home, I had already composed myself and sat quietly in the living room, watching as he pushed her wheelchair inside. Both of them were smiling, and Bruce, the ever-gentle scholar, exuded an air of intellectual refinement. "You were unfaithful to this marriage, so you leave with nothing." Her leg carried herself with such effortless grace that people noticed. The two of them were the epitome of the phrase, wolf in sheep's clothing. I gazed at them, wondering how. But for those letters, I never would have guessed that my nearly 70-year-old Bruce's smile vanished as soon as he saw my annoyance, and I never would have thought that Martha, the renowned artist who was praised for her talent and character, would voluntarily play the part of the other woman for decades. Respected professor and husband were capable of such betrayal all these years. Flared across his face when he inquired, "Why are you just sitting here? Have you finished making the guest room? Is dinner ready?" His tone was one of authority and chilly indifference, but he wasn't speaking to me like a wife of 40 years, rather, he was speaking to me like a maid. Our marriage had always been like this. Bruce gave me orders without showing any concern, and I obeyed. He never smiled at me the way he did at Martha. His demands were cold and uncaring, and my nose stung, but I suppressed my feelings. I had spent hours sitting here, sorting through my thoughts, and accepting what I had always tried to ignore. But even with all that acceptance, the pain was inevitable because I was only human. I had married Bruce when I was only 28 years old, and I had been married to him for 48 years, almost 50 years, and I had dedicated myself to him and our family, and this was how he returned the favor. Bruce's scowl deepened when I didn't. Then, Martha, who was in her wheelchair, observed our conversation with a subtle, almost invisible smirk of enjoyment. "Did you not hear me? What sort of attitude is this, sitting there like a statue in front of our guest? Do you lack manners?" "Don't be silly, Martha. Why would she mind?" she said in a gentle, worried voice. "Is Debbie upset about taking care of me? I don't want to be a burden." Bruce's annoyance vanished instantly with a bright, comforting smile. "She's just a housewife, and she has nothing else to do all day, so of course she's happy to assist." I almost chuckled when I mentioned that I was glad to look after her. Any residual affection I might have had for Bruce vanished the instant I gazed at him, the man I had spent almost my whole life with, and saw him for what he was, the facade. There was nothing left of my love or admiration for him. All of it was stripped away, leaving only the ugly truth underneath. "Bruce, if you want to take care of Martha, do it yourself. I have no duty or obligation to assist you. Additionally, I need to tell you that we are divorcing." I spoke with each of you about it, phrased slowly and, leaving no space for doubt. Bruce froze as though I had just slapped him. His finger trembled as he pointed at me, his face displaying disbelief. I laughed coldly, thinking, "No, Bruce, for the first time in my life." Bruce couldn't comprehend the abrupt declaration of divorce. "Debbie, what is this gibberish you're upset about? I've been the obedient wife for over 60 years, never stepping out of line or failing to fulfill his expectations. I want a divorce, and I want it now. Taking care of Martha is that if you didn't want to, you should have just said so." His tone was slightly irritated, and he tried to make it seem like I was the one who was acting irrationally, as though my alleged selfishness and cruelty were the only reasons I would dare to discuss divorce. Martha instantly put on a pathetic face, her eyes sparkling. Bruce went to her and gave her a comforting look, saying, "This has nothing to do with you. Debbie is just having one of her episodes at her age. Don't worry about it, Martha. I'm so sorry," with false remorse. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't broken my leg, you two wouldn't be fighting." Without a second thought, he turned the wheelchair around and began pushing Martha toward the door, ignoring me as though my words had been a mere outburst. He added dismissively, "If you don't want to take care of her, fine, I'll hire a nurse." I raised my voice. "Bruce, make time to visit the courthouse. We must file for divorce and, of course, talk about the division of assets." Bruce didn't acknowledge me. Instead, he just left me with his beloved Martha, treating me as an afterthought. I meticulously stored the decades' worth of correspondence between Bruce and Martha, and I immediately went to a local law firm to speak with a lawyer about the divorce. After examining my evidence, the lawyer told me that, if the evidence was strong, Bruce, the unfaithful party, might be able to leave with nothing. We spoke for more than an hour, and by the time I left, I had a clear Bruce had shown no mercy, but I wouldn't be as cruel as him, not for his benefit, but for our kids, as Eddie and Sandra had established prosperous lives with families and successful careers. I didn't want this divorce to become a public spectacle that might have an impact on them, so as long as Bruce approved of the split, I wouldn't go. I went out of my way to destroy him, so I put the evidence in a secure location, got a copy of the draft divorce agreement, and went home. When I arrived, I saw Eddie and Sandra sitting on the couch, and their expressions were sharp with frustration. Eddie was the first to say, "Mom, what the hell?" Sandra said in her voice with a hint of incredulity, "Are you doing this? Why would you suddenly ask Dad for a divorce?" As I stared at my son, the child I had raised myself and who now spoke to me as if I were the one in the wrong, I clenched my fingers around the divorce papers when Dad told us, "You're leaving me after all these years. Why is that necessary?" They didn't realize I couldn't hold them responsible for their reaction, but soon after, Bruce and I would be parting ways, and there was no question that he would wed Martha, and your father strayed, I said steadily. And he and Martha have been having an affair for decades. I won't sit back and tolerate it any longer. I'm divorcing him. The truth would eventually come out, so I might as well be the one to tell them first. I had poured my love into these kids. Eddie furrowed his brows. "Mom, we've known about Dad and Aunt Martha for a long time. They were deeply in love back then, but circumstances forced them apart. I raised them with care and foolishly thought they would support me. I thought they would be angry on my behalf and call Bruce and Martha out for their shamelessness." Sandra nodded in agreement. "Mom, given Dad's status, it's normal for him to have close female friends. You've spent your entire life as a housewife. You don't share his world, and you don't have deep feelings for her. Aunt Martha never married, and she's been waiting for him for years. Talks with him. To be honest, you were never really a good fit for Dad. You know he was forced to marry you, right?" She gave me a pitying look and said, "You're making a big deal out of nothing." She also mentioned that Dad and Aunt Martha are just close friends and have never betrayed you. I may have thought that Bruce and Martha were completely innocent, if I hadn't seen his letters, but how could they be? 40 years of entangled feelings, 40 years of vacations spent together, and 40 years in which Bruce never once brought me. He showered Martha with gifts, but he never remembered what I liked. He knew Martha's preferences like the back of his hand, but he never gave me a thoughtful gift. I had always assumed that this was a secret between Bruce and Martha that they kept from everyone, and I had assumed that my kids, like me, had been kept in the dark. Eddie was the first to shift uneasily. "Mom, we didn't mean to keep it from you, we just didn't want to disturb your dad's feelings." I looked at Eddie and then at Sandra, and when I spoke, my voice was hollow. "So you both knew you knew all along." They nodded in unison. Sandra quickly added, "Mom, stop making a fuss over nothing. This isn't the time to throw a jealous tantrum. Think about the family. Think about us. Respectable man, Aunt Martha isn't some random woman. We trust their character. They wouldn't cross the line. Stop talking about divorce like it's some casual thing." I almost choked on my breath. My husband's betrayal hurt, but my kids' response was intolerable. It was much worse than if I had truly raised them and dedicated my life to loving two kids who now stood here supporting the guy who had degraded me. Eddie could see the anger. Sandra nodded in agreement as I tried to calm things down by darkening my face and speaking in an unduly patient tone, as though I were a stubborn child's mother. "I get that you're upset, but what does it change? You have no job and have been disconnected from the outside world for decades. How are you going to survive on your own? You've had a comfortable life with Dad, without ever having to work or worry about money. What more could you want?" I laughed coldly and bitterly, without humor. I had never had a comfortable life. I had a promising career once, but Bruce's parents weren't doing well, so he had to focus on his job, so I gave it up and stayed at home to care for them. After that, we had kids, and I focused on raising them. By the time they were grown, I had grandchildren to take care of, school pickups and drop-offs, meals to prepare, and 60 years of living for myself. I had never once complained because I stupidly thought that my sacrifices were recognized and appreciated and that my love was understood, but to them, I had been enjoying life. I had been someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's grandma, and so on. What kind of luxury is it to get up before dawn to prepare breakfast? What kind of privilege is it to scrub floors, wash clothes, run errands, and prepare meals every day for 40 years? I had never gone on a trip, seen a movie in a theater, or gone to a concert. I was just a glorified maid, and even maids got paid. If you don't want to take care of Aunt Martha, that's okay. Dad can hire a nurse. Just don't make this a big deal. You've lived here for a long time. Do you want the neighbors to gossip? Eddie softened his voice as he realized he might have gone too far. I just stared at my kids, my face frozen and complete Disbelief. My hands trembled with anger as Sandra added, I need Aunt Martha's help with something, Mom. Even if you don't care about Dad, at least think about me. Don't make her hate. Eddie went on to say, just call Dad, apologize, and let's move past this. They thought I was the embarrassment. Before I could respond, they called Bruce's number, pushed the phone into my hand, and waited for 40 years, whether I was right or wrong. I had always been the one to apologize first, to bow my head, and now they expected me to do it again, to apologize to the man who had spent while he and Martha were traveling the world and having a good time. I was trapped inside this house, invisible and unimportant, and they still expected me to bow my head. His life was devoted to another woman, and he wrote her love letters while treating me like a shadow. When I looked at my son and daughter, the very children I had poured my love into and raised myself, they treated me like a stranger. Perhaps they thought I was nothing now that they were grown up and had their own lives, and they denigrated me as the stay-at-home mother who had not only no money but also no. I looked down at the phone they had thrust into my hand and heard Bruce's icy voice on the other end. Under Eddie and Sandra's expectant eyes, I spoke, enunciating every word, but they treated me like a weakling who should be ignored and trampled over. Eddie and Sandra saw that I was resolute and shook their heads in frustration, telling me that I was being unreasonable. They didn't stay long, and they had no interest in standing by. Bruce didn't take me seriously, and he dismissed me with a few half-hearted reprimands before hanging up. And suddenly I was by myself. I sat on the couch and stared at the emptiness around me, laughing bitterly. My entire life is such a joke and a pitiful existence, but self-pity won't get me anywhere because there is no one to turn to or share my sorrow with. For the first time in my life, I was going to fight for myself, and Bruce hadn't done anything. You probably assumed that I would give in and swallow my pride, as I always had, but I wasn't going to back down, not this time, not forever. It gave him a week. 7 days went by, and he never called or showed up. He assumed he could ignore me and that I would return, but he was mistaken. I began packing because Eddie and Sandra had shown themselves to be just as aloof and self-centered as their father. I had previously been concerned about protecting them and keeping the divorce quiet for their benefit, but after that talk, I wasn't just going to divorce Bruce, I was going to make sure he left with nothing. Box by box, I packed up his belongings, but it was only while I sorted. He didn't care about me, so why should I keep trying to protect people who treated me like I was nothing? I discovered how much of the house belonged to him as I went through it. His clothes, shoes, books, and other possessions were packed in dozens of boxes that covered the living room and were stacked high in the hallway. Then there was I, who had hardly anything for more than 40 years, no nice clothes, and no beloved possessions. Possessions, simply a lifetime of service and sacrifice to ensure that everyone else had what they needed. When I finished, the house felt lighter and more liberated. The following morning, I called Bruce and said, I've packed up your things. You can come pick them up, or send someone to do it. He let out a sharp exhale, which already annoyed Debbie. Do you need to be this irrational? All I asked was for you to assist in looking after Martha for a few days. You've looked after people before, so why are you making such a big deal out of this? He stood on his pedestal, staring down at me. I couldn't stand his bullshit. I'm only keeping your belongings for 3 hours, and if you don't come get them, I'm throwing them out. The home is also mine, and Bruce didn't even let me finish before he lost it. Sitting in the living room, I started figuring out the finances of my marriage to Bruce. I didn't know all the specifics, but I knew there were 3 properties in 2 cars. Bruce was a well-known professor with a high salary and significant bonuses, and I swore before slamming the phone down. I couldn't care less how Bruce would handle things at this point. The 3 hours passed with no sign of Bruce, so I called a firm to come pick up the old stuff. Just as they were loading his books and papers onto the truck, Bruce arrived and stopped the movers, ranting angrily. Awards, I meticulously added everything up step by step. I told him icily, I warned you came too late, you're impossible, and he turned to glare at me angrily. Stop right now, he said, pointing a quivering finger at me, the person he had always oppressed, the one who had never. Bruce finally started to show genuine interest in me after she raised her voice. He said, if you're so determined, let's talk about the divorce course. I felt that we needed to have this conversation, so we sat down on opposite sides, and I gave him the divorce paperwork. When Bruce got to the part describing the split of assets, his eyes widened and he stammered, Debbie, how dare you? I smirked cruelly. You cheated on me, Bruce. Order, just sign here, Bruce said. I laid out the facts, naming Martha as the guilty party. Bruce's face turned a deep shade of red, and he opened his mouth to argue, but what do you think will happen? Or do you argue that the guilty party doesn't get a penny, and you leave with nothing? Without hesitation, I tossed a stack of documents onto the table in front of him. Bruce snatched them up, and his hands trembled as he pointed at me, scarcely able to articulate how you have these after more than 40 years of Bruce no longer saw me as a person, much less an equal, because I had assumed the position of the obedient housewife, soft-spoken, mild-mannered, and always taking care of the household. He believed that I was weak, easily influenced, and voiceless, but I wasn't just any docile woman. I had Bruce, on the other hand, who had come from nothing and had only a small farm to his name when he met me. He was a student of my father and had his sights set on my family's wealth and influence, not just mine. Bruce had once been a brilliant student from a family of intellectuals. My parents were professors. I fell for him not only because of his ambition but also because of his charm, drive, and seeming kindness. I had assumed he was a good man, but I was mistaken. I had made him seem perfect when he was anything but. He had split from his true love, Martha, to marry me to use my family's connections to further his career. But a poor student, Bruce, would have been appreciative of my parents for providing him with the chance to succeed, if he had any morals. Instead, he used their assistance to rise higher, leaving me behind. After our marriage, I did everything in my power to support Bruce. Quitting my job to take care of his parents and keep our house for him to Bruce was too greedy to care about responsibility. Instead, he exploited my family's support and treated me like a servant, treating me like a caretaker while he romanced. If he had any sense of responsibility, he would have left Martha behind and shared his life with me. He believed that I was stuck with him, that I would never leave, and that I had remained silent for so long because I had dedicated my life to him out of love. However, I now realized that Bruce had never loved me, so why should I put up with this for so long? Bruce and Martha had been reckless in their affair, showing off their love while continuing to vacations together, having a great time, and forgetting to hide their tracks, but I was able to follow their movements over the previous 2 years using the letters Bruce had written to Martha. Last Christmas, they went skiing in the mountains, and this July, they took a vacation on an island, taking a ton of pictures. We went on an adventure together once more, and Martha tried to push herself by rock climbing. She believed her body could handle it, but after living a pampered life, she wasn't ready for such a demanding sport, so she fell and broke her leg. When she saw his lover hurt, Bruce was frantic and shamelessly displayed his people assumed they were a married couple admiring their perfect love, completely unaware that they were just two cheaters. Bruce never expected Bruce's concern and affection for her had forgotten that we were now living in the digital age. As he comforted Martha, a photo was taken that captured the intimate moment. That I would obtain numerous private images and videos of him and Martha. Bruce, a renowned film critic and a retired but influential university professor, both recognized the scandal their affair could cause. Bruce tried to speak to me in a softer tone, saying, "I just can't let go of don't lie to me, Bruce. If you were a guy with any dignity, you wouldn't be so involved in this. I won't give you any chances to get a divorce." Martha, nothing ever happened between us. Before he could finish, I abruptly intervened. Non-negotiable. Given my strong commitment, Bruce attempted to plead for the assets. "Could you at least give me 20% of them?" I firmly refused him, not even considering it. I carefully considered every word he said. "The divorce is complete, and you are left with nothing. I won't reveal your affair with Martha, but if you hurt me in any way, you know the consequences." Bruce was well aware of the repercussions. He had been praised and recognized for years and couldn't stand the idea of being publicly humiliated. Ultimately, he signed the divorce papers after Bruce left Eddie, and Sandra showed up shortly after. They burst in, furious. They wanted things in a tone that suggested I had committed some horrible crime, and they were full of accusations. "You want him to go with nothing?" I couldn't help but chuckle at their righteous wrath when I responded, "You want to talk about conscience? Fine, let me ask you. Have you contributed to this house? Everything in it is the result of our dad's hard work. How can you be so cruel toward him? Doesn't your conscience hurt? I scoffed at you from the moment you were born. Did your father ever cook for you, clean your clothes, or even drive you anywhere? That's all me, the conscienceless one." They were stunned into silence. I pointed at Eddie and went on to say that your father and Martha were deeply in love, weren't they? If I didn't have a conscience, I would have let you die years ago. They've been having an affair for more than 40 years, so they are a couple, but their love has been based on cruelty. Eddie was stunned, but he asked, "What are you saying?" I said icily, "Your dear father never wanted you after he found out. I never understood why you and your father wanted to remain childless, but now I realize that he had already decided to stay with Martha and that he never wanted a burden like you. This is the real face of the father, Eddie, whom you greatly admire." He was pregnant, shook his head in shock, thinking, "This can't be true, you're lying. My dad isn't like that." I grinned bitterly. "You don't want to believe me, okay, but the truth doesn't matter to you, does it? All you care about is the money." I waved them away, telling them to go because I didn't want to see you no longer, but neither Sandra nor Eddie moved. Sandra said, "What are you going to do with all that money? You don't know how to manage it." Sandra added, "If you get scammed, it'll be a disaster. You won't get married again because there are so many people in the world. People who are trying to marry for money are worried about you and believe it would be better if we handled the money for you." Now that I know their true motivation, I laughed icily and cruelly. So you want the money? You're just like your father, who was very self-centered and helped others hurt me. After threatening to call the police, Eddie and Sandra were eventually forced out of the house because they lacked loyalty and a sense of family, so I had no reason to continue to indulge them. I had already given up on them wanting my money, and they were dreaming that I would give every penny to charity before I gave them a cent. Put the house up for sale right away and promised to cut off all contact with them going forward. While I was selling the house, I started looking for a new one because the current one was too big for me to live alone and felt too empty. I chose to purchase a more manageable apartment that was about 100 square meters, but it didn't. It took me a while to find one that I liked, and after I bought it, I went out to celebrate dinner. That's when Martha contacted me, pretending to be innocent, and started to explain, "Debbie, I know there's been some misunderstanding between you and Bruce recently because of me. Is it because of me that you want to divorce him, Bruce? And you must believe me when I say that I haven't done anything." I honestly don't know where she got the courage to come to me with this explanation because for 40 years she had been secretly doing heinous things behind my back with Bruce. If Martha had even the smallest amount of dignity, she would never have so blatantly destroyed my family in this way, but of course I interrupted her, saying, "Oh, so you're telling me that after all these years you've received gifts from Bruce and traveled with him all over the world, but you didn't know those gifts were bought with money, you didn't know the hotel stays and meals cost money, and you didn't know that." Of course, I wasn't going to put up with her foolishness. Understand that the money you spent was a part of the assets that Bruce and I shared. The legal wife, you are aware of what you have done, and now you dare to defend yourself by saying that you are stealing because I wasn't giving Martha a single inch. Martha said, "I admit. He's been married to you for decades, so how could you let him leave with nothing?" I shot back, "Martha, just because I promised Bruce that I wouldn't expose your affair doesn't mean I'm going to show you mercy. You know exactly what you've done, so stop acting like anything. That's why Bruce and I became close because of work. More than Bruce's mistress, don't approach me, I'm not Bruce, and I won't put up with you." Martha's rage erupted as she spoke, and it was clear that Bruce had always claimed that you had no sense of humor and that your only concern was money. "Debbie, you are the most vile and cunning person." I smiled and calmly replied, "You too must be so noble, huh? You don't love money, but you wear gold, live in a mansion, and drive luxury cars. You're here begging me not to make Bruce leave with nothing. You'd better put that into careful consideration." The last thing Martha wanted to say was, "Debbie, you're so pathetic. Your husband doesn't want you, your kids despise you, and you've been a joke for all these years." Martha was furious and unable to control her anger, but she was still trying to provoke me. My children had always firmly sided with her, and Bruce had supported her every word. Martha felt proud that she had won a small victory over my kids, but I remained composed and spoke steadily as I responded, "Ungrateful kids, if you're happy with them, then I'm happy to give them to you. I hope you can keep laughing like this for a long time." Martha became restless when she realized that her words had no bearing on me. She shared more videos and images of herself with Eddie and Sandra, as well as more pictures of herself and Bruce showing off their intimate moments, but to be honest, I didn't feel anything when I saw all of these. As the days went by, my divorce hearing with Bruce soon came, so I got up early and went straight to the past month had been blissful for me at the courthouse. I had purchased a new home, furnished it to my liking, and moved in. I was no longer required to get up early to make breakfast for the family. Instead, I slept until I naturally woke up and didn't have to worry about dinner preparation, making various dishes to suit everyone's tastes. Life was easy and carefree. I gained a few pounds, but my energy and spirit were at an all-time high. In contrast, Bruce appeared to be a shell of himself. His shirt was wrinkled. I ate what I wanted, slept when I felt like it, and spent my free time buying clothes, getting beauty treatments, learning how to arrange flowers, painting, and playing the piano. I nearly burst out laughing when I saw him like this. Martha had been sending me daily updates on her and Bruce's alleged romantic moments since I had gotten upset with her during our last conversation, but now his beard had grown out, he hadn't bothered to shave, and his eyes were empty. Giving him unrelenting care like a loyal servant while Bruce did nothing. But now that he was with Martha, everything had changed. Because of her leg injury, Martha needed Bruce to feed her, bring her tea, bathe her, and help her in every way. Martha loved being pampered, but Bruce, who had never done a household chore in his life, was Bruce's struggling this month had led him to realize that Martha, the woman he had dreamed about for so long, wasn't as perfect as he had thought. She wasn't the unachievable beauty he had imagined. Instead, she was just a regular woman who needed food, used the restroom, didn't wear makeup, and didn't cover up her imperfections with thick layers of foundation. Couldn't appear flawless and beautiful for him any longer, and at last realized that Martha was just like any other woman. Her skin sagged, and the wrinkles around her eyes were more obvious than before. She didn't give a damn about what Bruce thought, and she didn't treat him with the respect and consideration he felt he deserved, which was something he had sorely desired. Different Bruce felt bad about everything and even tried to persuade me to change my mind about the divorce. What a dreamer. I signed the papers without hesitation, and as I left the courthouse, I couldn't help but hum a happy song because I was at last free and content. Bruce, on the other hand, was confronting the truth of taking care of Martha during her protracted recuperation. His difficulties had only just started. After obtaining the divorce decree, I organized a tour group and began exploring the world. I kept Martha's contact details intact and watched her as she showed off her relationship with Bruce. As they say, a long illness makes for an unappreciative child, and Bruce wasn't exactly a model of piety either. He had been living in luxury for decades, serving Martha like a mule, and now he was struggling. He had to join in by pretending to be happy in front of the camera for everyone to see. I can only imagine how I was aware of Martha's activities, and wanted me to witness her alleged happiness, but happiness isn't something you can flaunt. It's like shoes, only the person wearing them knows if they fit properly. Martha often shared pictures of her romantic moments with Bruce on social media, and when I was still married to Bruce, she had blocked other people and only let me view her posts, but since Bruce and I were divorced, there was no reason to keep it a secret any longer. She began publicly expressing her love for Bruce in the hopes of receiving the approval and acclaim she so desperately desired, but Martha is not the center of the world. People will only give you praise if they truly admire you or if they need something from you. Martha's posts about her and Bruce's relationship didn't have the impact she had hoped for. Instead, there were whispers behind their backs. Bruce and I had been married for more than 40 years, and our marriage had been regarded as an example of success, but all of a sudden, we were quietly divorced, and Martha and Bruce were together. So fast that anyone with a brain could see that they weren't clean. Bruce had been in academia for a long time, and he had made a lot of enemies. Martha, on the other hand, had made a lot of enemies during her career by stifling people who wanted to rise in their public ranks. The display of love only provided their rivals with a chance to retaliate. Rumors started to circulate that Bruce and Martha had been together for a long time before their divorce, accusing them of having an affair. The more they showed off their relationship, the more evidence came to light, and soon after, those pieces of information were leaked. Bruce and Martha were unaware of the seriousness of the situation, which led to a public uproar. Martha wanted people to congratulate her and Bruce on their love, but it backfired. She was upset, but she was unaware that it wasn't me who was spreading the rumors behind the scenes. I couldn't help but laugh when Martha Furious called me, her voice shaking with emotion as she yelled, "Debbie, it's you, isn't it? You're behind this. You're jealous of the love Bruce has for me. You're just a shameless, petty person. The shameless one here is you, Martha. You've crossed every line," and Martha couldn't bring herself to acknowledge her shortcomings because she was certain that I was the one stirring the pot, trying to destroy her and Bruce's reputation. "You still dare to show it off. Should I call you out for your lack of common sense, or should I just call you plain stupid?" After Bruce called a few times and got no response, they both realized there was no chance of getting the money back. Martha's leg had finally healed, and she was ready to show off the love she had missed out on for all those years. Bruce called me and asked me to return the divorce settlement, but of course, that was just a pipe dream, so I ignored it. She and Bruce went to events together, watched movies, and had dinners together, but the damage was already done because, every time they went out, people pointed fingers at them and accused her of being Bruce's mistress. Martha was so incensed that she almost choked on her rage, and, refusing to take the mockery, Martha decided to team up with my 2 kids and Bruce to discredit me. They began bringing me up in front of people they knew, suggesting that I had cheated, that my marriage to Bruce had been a failure, that I had left him voluntarily, and that I was dishonest while I was traveling with my tour group, conversing and eating with people of the other sex. They fabricated a story that I was traveling with my lover, Martha, who worked hard to get my name out of the mud. Eddie and Sandra firmly supported them, putting up a united front, and the lies they spread led everyone to believe that I was the guilty party after all. What kind of kids would be so vile and shameless as to disparage their mother? Martha thought she had won. She thought the worst was over, but their enemies had discovered me and exposed all of Martha's falsehoods and defamation against me in front of me. Even a kind cat has its claws, and I was no longer the person I used to be. I was angry because I had given them plenty of opportunities to back off, but they persisted in pushing me. If they wanted to dig their graves, I would be happy to assist them. Bruce and Martha's affair was made public so that their enemies couldn't pull. Photos of Bruce and Martha at a hotel were shamelessly shared online, along with all the affectionate moments they had shared. This turned into damning evidence, and the more people looked into Bruce and Martha's past, the more they destroyed their reputation. The public looked more closely at the backgrounds of Bruce and Martha, and as more information surfaced, the moral outcry against them grew stronger. Bruce called and demanded answers, but I gently informed him that evil will always be punished in kind and that karma never loses an address. His past, when he was impoverished and had depended on my parents, was also unearthed, and people started criticizing him for being unappreciative. Martha, on the other hand, was in for even worse publicity because someone unearthed information about her affair with a man and decided she didn't marry Bruce because she didn't have a deep and lasting love for him. Producer and director. 40 years ago, Martha was unable to conceive due to an abortion that damaged her uterus. Rather than telling Bruce the truth, she chose to conceal it by hanging her alleged devotion to him in front of him. After all, Bruce had already succeeded by that point, and Martha wasn't about to. Eddie and Sandra's coldness toward me, their support for Martha, and their attempts to hide the affair were all exposed, and it quickly became apparent that they had been assisting Martha in hiding Bruce's affair to give up on him as her backup. The more people who looked into their lives, the more gruesome the revelations became. The public backlash turned the spotlight on them in exchange for favors, and even their careers suffered. The turmoil lasted for several months, and there were constant discussions about it online. Every comment seemed to weave my name into a new story, and every discussion added another label for me, but I paid little attention. I had just finished a visit to a small town in southern France and had just started my year-long global travels, so I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Life goes on, and in the end, it's my journey to walk. Other people's opinions are just the voices of bystanders. Went by in the blink of an eye, and not even the glimmer of regret remained inside me. That year of travel was unhindered. Nobody took away my freedom, and I roamed through various nations and cities, feeling that freeing sense of unending freedom every morning when I woke up. When I arrived in a small Norwegian town, the cold winter air brought with it a refreshing sharpness wrapped in a thick coat, but I didn't mind because my heart was already warmed by a quiet peace. I sat by the window in a charming cafe, enjoying Norwegian salmon roe, allowing each bite to leave a taste of the ocean on my tongue. Buzzed constantly, but I decided to ignore it because it felt like the world had stopped, and I was alone with the scenery when my phone suddenly rang and said, "Sandra, your dad is in the hospital. He has been diagnosed with cancer, and he doesn't have much time left. Can you come see him?" I stared at the message, feeling no emotion stirred, so I inhaled deeply, ran my finger around the screen, and finally decided to erase it. The response was straightforward: "No, I'm not a heartless person or someone who doesn't comprehend human feelings, but I'm just a regular person, and I understand the anguish of betrayal, deceit, and I would no longer readily forgive those who had upended my life, especially Bruce and Martha. Their pain and regret were no longer my concern, and I had no duty to bear their burden." As time went on, I continued traveling, embracing the love I once knew that had long been eclipsed by these betrayals, the beauty of the world, and thinking back on the lessons I had learned in life. In the meantime, my phone was still full of messages about Bruce's deteriorating health, Sandra's worried messages, and more, but it all felt like passing smoke that could be ignored without affecting my feelings. Half a year later, I came home, and as soon as I got off the plane, I received yet a message from Sandra saying that my mom and dad had died. I didn't react, I didn't respond, and they didn't have any place in my life anymore. Bruce's passing didn't make me feel guilty or add to the weight of my journey because I had long since moved past their shadows and discovered my light. I carefully tucked my phone away, and I was looking at the busy airport terminal crowd with a silent smile on my face. Everything that had happened before was gone, and the pain had become meaningless. I was now living my life as it truly was. Without limitations, without sadness, with joy, freedom, and limitless possibilities. Life went on, and so did I, the one who now lived only. This is Martha's story, and for her, memories frequently re-emerge on calm nights like an intractable scar. At the time, I was a young girl from a low-income household, and I had a trace of naivete in my eyes. However, I had a heart full of desire and defiance, and every time I looked in the mirror at my unremarkable face, I felt uneasy because I knew that, in contrast to the daughters of wealthy families, I was always lacking that one thing, the natural brilliance that seemed to come so naturally to them, until Bruce came along. Like a stone thrown by fate into my life's water, he was a rising star in academia at the time. Charming, intelligent, and almost well-known, he not only won my respect but also stoked a strong desire in me to support him. My family was Bruce, on the other hand, was the gifted scholar with knowledge as broad as the sea, with a presence that could not be ignored. His every motion emanated a kind of aura I couldn't ignore. I was the only member of my family to attend college, and every cent came from either a scholarship or my family's struggles. Though our backgrounds were very different, I knew deep down that I relied on him and that he could open doors to a wider world for me. I longed for the inherent prestige that came with being at his side, but time is a constraint. Double-edged sword. We used to study together in the library, talk about academics, and envision the future, but gradually Bruce's focus began to move away from me. He grew busier, more aloof, and more reclusive until, in the end, his gaze was no longer focused on me. Debbie, the kind, family-oriented woman who became his wife, was no longer full of hope for the future but rather resigned to making concessions to life's realities. She came from a wealthy family, and her parents' support gave him a sense of stability in the face of life's challenges. Since I was too young to comprehend why he had taken such a decision, my jealousy grew, and even though I was aware of my poor origins, I was unable to accept it for years. For Bruce, it was the most logical choice, but my heart started to rip slowly and brutally apart. Even though he had a daughter and was her husband, my emotional anchor, I remained intellectually close. We periodically crossed paths, and during those exchanges, I could still sense the strong bond between us, down that he would always have a place in his heart for me. With Bruce's assistance, my career slowly started to take off as an artist with some recognition in the movie business, and I depended on his resources and leveraged his academic connections to gain entry into the heart of the art scene. Bruce's fame served as the springboard for my ascent, and I made sure to support him at every art show and movie release so that everyone could see our unspoken bond. I realized Bruce could never provide me with a whole family, so I began looking for replacements in Deb's children, her boy just entering the world, while the glitzy moments on the outside belied the emptiness and worry that screamed at me. I could never bear children. Since the employment was unpredictable and her daughter was constantly rising in society and becoming a well-known figure, I couldn't pass up the chance to get more involved in their life. I started spending more time with Debbie's kids, showing them love and providing them with artistic support. They were open to accepting the resources I offered, and gradually, my possessiveness grew stronger. I no longer wanted to be a passive observer. Instead, I wanted to be involved in their lives, just like Debbie had done with Bruce. I wanted to exert control over them. My total dependence on Bruce gradually turned into manipulation. Anytime I felt uneasy or worried about being forgotten, I would ingeniously entice him back into my life with well-chosen phrases. Our relationship, albeit unpleasant at times, became my lifeline. It was the one thing that anchored me, even though it no longer held the same warmth and devotion. But as the years went by, Bruce ceased to be the active young man I had once admired, and the memories of our time spent together started to wane. Most recently, my leg injury made it more difficult for me to move freely, serving as a continual reminder of the admiration and dependence I previously had for Bruce had turned into emptiness and apathy as he pushed me into the living room one evening. He was no longer the hero I had once pursued but simply an average person. A man who had once relied on me was no longer gentle with me due to the weight of his obligations. His patience had worn thin in the face of my illnesses, and whenever I needed his assistance, a spark of annoyance appeared in his eyes. I became a burden to him, a presence that fell short of his expectations, and the person who had sacrificed everything for him began to view me with increasing irritation. This panic prompted me to reflect on the we had corresponded via letters, and, in the days when we were young and full of dreams, I had sacrificed everything for him, even my future, but now that he was cold and uninterested, I started to question whether it had all been a dream or if everything had been a self-created illusion. Baron was waiting for me when the public started speculating about our relationship's secrets. I had always wondered how our love would end, but I never thought it would end in such shame. At that point, I felt like all of my hard work had been in vain. As I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I thought to myself, I deserve this loneliness over the years because I've greedily sought to possess everything. And I unfocusedly burned the letters we had exchanged, allowing the flames to consume them as though doing so would erase the pain in my heart. In the end, I had lost the most valuable thing I owned, the girl I had once chased, following fantasies of hope and longing for love, but now all I had was what I used to believe that I had won the game of fate, but now I see nothingness and unending remorse. That everything had been a figment of my imagination. Bruce, Debbie. Eventually, everyone who had previously been a part of my life would depart. It appeared to be meant to be a tragedy, a tale of inadequacy and avarice. I had written for my benefit.